Hey guys! Tonight we're stepping quietly into the marble veins of a city that once claimed to be the centre of the world. Constantinople, crowned with gold, encircled by sea, cloaked in incense and echoes. A city where saints look down from every dome, and yet so many lives move beneath their eyes unnoticed. This isn't a tale of emperors or icon painters, no glorious robes or jewelled relics. This is the other side of the palace walls, the cold side, the dark side. You're not royalty tonight. You're not even close. You're one of the countless bodies that keep the palace breathing, barely, before it wakes. Before we drift further into the hallways of this sleepless place, take a soft moment. If these nightly travels through history help you rest, you might gently tap that like button or consider subscribing, only if it truly feels right for you. And I'd love it if you left a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is there. It's always a quiet wonder to see the hours and places where this little circle gathers. Now, dim the lights, let the air grow still around you. Maybe turn on a low fan or a soft noise in the background. We're not in a rush tonight. Let's settle our breath and step softly into a day that began long before the sun ever reached the domes. You wake not from a dream, but from the ache of sleeping too still on cold stone. Your bed is a narrow wooden frame, bowed in the middle, with a sack of wool flattened from years of lying on the same spot. You never chose this place. The overseer pointed, and now it's yours. If someone dies or gets reassigned, maybe you'll move closer to the brazier. Maybe, but for now the warmth barely reaches you, and your blanket smells faintly of oil and mildew, though it's the only one you have. You keep your feet tucked in as long as you can, curling them under yourself until the cold air forces you up. The servants' quarters don't sleep deeply. The air is full of soft coughs, the clink of wooden buckets, and the squeak of the door that never shuts right. Someone whispers a prayer. Someone else hisses for silence. The others are rising too, slipping into clothes that are more patched than whole, garments that itch and chafe and carry the sense of the scullery no matter how many times they've been rinsed in the public wash tubs. No one has fresh linen. You have what you have, and it stays yours until it rots off or is taken away. You don't speak as you get dressed. Voices are for later. Now it's about movement, quiet, practiced, resigned. Your tunic clings slightly, still damp from yesterday's steam and labour. Your legs protest as you stand. The ache is deep and familiar, like an old song played on tired strings. You stretch just enough to crack your back, careful not to groan too loudly. The man sleeping near the wall hates being reminded of other people's bones. You step into your shoes, their cracked leather stretched, beyond their intended size and fastened with fraying cords that threaten to snap each morning. One is missing its sole entirely. You keep hoping for a trade, maybe with someone whose feet are worse than yours. It's a quiet kind of bargaining among the workers. No one says anything. You just leave your shoes near the edge of your bed, slightly angled, a silent offer. So far, no takers. There's no time to think. You know the rhythm. Down the corridor, past the basin where the older women scrub the washcloths in silence. Past the place where the bread was burned 2 mornings ago, filling the lower halls with the smell of sour ash. The head cook still hasn't let it go. The boy who ruined it limps now. No one asked why. The hallway to the scullery is colder than the rest. The stone here is slick with old steam, condensation from the upper kitchens dripping through cracks in the ceiling like the building itself is sweating. You run your fingers lightly along the wall, not for support, just habit. The stone is pitted, worn smooth in places where generations of hands like yours did the same thing. The walls remember everyone, especially the ones who didn't last. You arrive early, always early. The overseer keeps notes. Anyone late 3 times in a 10-day gets moved to the latrine shifts, and that's if they're lucky. You don't want to be cleaning the emperor's waste channels. You've heard the stories. Rats the size of sandals, pipes that belch gas. The stink clinging to your skin for days. Better to scrape ash and polish mosaic. Today starts like most days. The fire's already been lit by someone even earlier than you. The bread has been placed. The steam clings low to the floor, swirling like ghosts under the long wooden counters. You find your bucket. It's the same one. You carved a tiny notch into the handle to make sure. Not because it's special, just because in a place where you don't own anything, even a splintered handle becomes a piece of you. The first bell hasn't rung yet, but your arms are already wet to the elbow. Ash sticks to everything, your skin, your clothes, your teeth if you're not careful. The sound of scraping fills the chamber, rhythmic and mindless, like a slow breath. You focus on the patterns in the stone as you work, little broken bits of coloured glass, reds, greens, some gold leaf, still flaking away. Once they told a story. Now you just polish them and hope no one notices the missing tiles. There's a silence in this kind of labour. Not peaceful, just total. You become invisible here. The overseer doesn't yell if you're working. Nobles don't glance down if you don't look up. You move from one tile to another, wiping, checking, scraping. It's a kind of meditation, if you can call it that. Your knees ache, your neck burns, but for a while no one asks anything of you, not until the third bell. That's when the upper stewards begin their rounds. The stewards are always clean, always dry. Their sandals don't squeak and their belts are real leather. They walk like they were born on polished stone, like they don't remember what it means to kneel or carry or scrub. They pass you without words and you shrink a little lower each time. Not out of fear, out of calculation. Eye contact draws attention. Attention draws questions. Questions draw labour. Still, there's a strange beauty to the palace, even from the floor. The morning light catches in the high windows, casting slow shifting shapes across the tiles. Dust floats like gold in the beams. Somewhere above you, a choir begins a soft chant, one of the monks perhaps, rehearsing the morning liturgy. The sound slips down through the arches like a breeze. You let it wash over you just for a moment before the next chore, and so the day begins. The steam thickens as the morning burns forward, curling around the iron pans and seeping into your skin until you can't tell whether you're sweating or simply absorbing the heat around you. You've long since finished the mosaic hallway, and now your hands are plunged into the basins by the sidewall, rinsing and squeezing out the same linens that will later wipe tables you're never allowed to eat at. The fabric is coarse and stubborn, the water lukewarm, already murky from others who came before. There's a rhythm to it. Dunk, ring, slap against the stone, repeat. The ache in your wrist settles somewhere below the surface, the kind of soreness that becomes a part of you, like a dull echo. Your breath comes slow now, not from calm, but because you've taught yourself not to waste air here. The kitchen fires already chew up most of it. It's like breathing through bread. Voices rise muffled and tense near the supply passage. A steward is arguing with one of the bakers. You can't hear the words, just the tone sharp and curling like a whip. Probably about the flour again. The last shipment arrived spoiled full of mites, and it's been a scandal ever since. Not that it changed anything for you, your meals are the same. A spoonful of lentils, a hunk of yesterday's bread, a cup of boiled water flavoured faintly by whatever herb was cheapest that week. Still, even Sendel has its tears. For the likes of you, it means more crumbs, less rest, and longer hours spent scrubbing the marble that leads to places you'll never be allowed to sit. By now, your shoulders are soaked. Your tunic clings to you like an extra skin, heavy and sour with steam and labour. A young girl beside you sneezes, and the overseer glances her way. He doesn't speak, but his eyes narrow just slightly the way they do before someone disappears for a few days of discipline. You look down at your cloth again. There's always one rule louder than the rest, so don't be noticed. Even kindness is dangerous here. If you help someone finish a task, it might make them look lazy. If you offer bread, they might think you're hoarding. So you stay, quiet, small, and just busy enough to seem useful but not threatening. Invisibility isn't a curse in this place, it's survival. The halls begin to thrum with footsteps. The upper level is awakened. You hear the shuffling sandals of scribes and record keepers, their tablets clacking as they hurry to morning briefings. Priests pass in small clusters, their voices low and smooth, carrying the scent of sweet wine and old parchment. You wonder what it feels like to walk with a scroll in your hands instead of a bucket. The Emperor's court doesn't eat for another 2 hours, but the air has already shifted. The palace begins to perform its grandeur now. Curtains are drawn wide, incense is lit, tapestries are fluffed and realigned by men who wear gloves just for handling them. You, of course, are not allowed near the drapery. You're too low for linen that rich. Your task shifts again. The head steward calls for water, always in that clipped voices of his, as though the very act of speaking to you wounds him. You bow your head, hands trembling slightly as you adjust the basin on your shoulder. It's heavier than it should be, sloshing with every step, threatening to tip and splash your already soaked feet. The corridor you take winds left from the scullery, past a small shrine to St. Theophanes. You always whisper a word there, not a prayer exactly, just a sort of nod, a habit. You don't expect help, but the flickering oil lamp comforts you, in a very small stub way. It's the only flame in this place that seems to burn just for you. By mid-morning your legs are leaden. You've been up since before the stars faded. You've scraped soot from tiles, folded cloths, polished a silver bowl that reflected your tired face back at you in wavering metal. You've watched a noble boy spill figs on the floor and laugh while a steward blamed the mess on one of your own. That boy won't remember you. His sandals were embroidered. Yours barely stay on your feet. But you remember the sound of his voice, light and cruel, like cold wine. You remember the tilt of the steward's head as he pointed, not at the figs, but at the girl who passed near them. She's gone now, sent to the outer kitchens. It's always the outer kitchens. Every part of the palace is beautiful in its own way, even the parts you clean. You know the details better than the courtiers who walk them. You know where the coloured glass is chipped in the floor, mosaic outside the storage room. You know which pillar near the entrance to the great hall hides a crack filled in with the gold leaf. You know how to polish bronze without leaving streaks, how to fold the towel so the edge faces outward, how to keep your eyes just low enough to seem obedient but not suspicious. You've studied these walls like scripture, not out of reverence, out of necessity. The palace is a beast, and if you don't learn its ways, it swallows you whole. It's nearly noon when the kitchen boils into chaos. The second meal of the day is being prepared for the High Court, and that means duck, honeyed carrots, some kind of imported dates, and 3 different breads, none of which you'll ever taste. You're reassigned again, this time to the hallway outside the audience chamber. Not to clean, just to wow, so they might need someone to run a message, fetch more cloth, carry away waste. You stand still, hands clasped, eyes forward. The marble beneath your feet is cold again, untouched by the kitchen heat. Your skin tightens in the chill, goosebumps rising even as sweat clings to your back. A procession of officials moves past you, their cloaks trailing slightly, their sandals whispering on the stone. One of them glances your way, just briefly. His eyes scan your posture, your hands, your shoes. You hold your breath. Then he looks away. You are perfect, for now. Time loses meaning here. You blink, and an hour has passed. You shift your weight from one foot to the other, quietly, carefully, so as not to scuff the floor. You're not allowed to lean. You're not allowed to speak unless spoken to. And you certainly aren't allowed to sit. You watch the shadow of the sun stretch across the far wall as it passes through the high windows. There's something about that light, warm where you aren't, golden where you can't touch. It reminds you that the world continues outside these walls, even if you don't. Later, much later, when the court retires and the palace begins to quiet, you'll return to the quarters. You'll eat something hot but plain, boiled until it forgets its name. You'll sit in silence with the others, not out of coldness but out of exhaustion. Words require energy. You don't have any left. You'll lie down in your cot, in your same corner, and stare at the same crack in the ceiling that you've stared at for years. You'll think briefly about what life would be like if you weren't here. If you were free, if you lived on the hill near the markets and sold figs or made sandals. But the thought is dangerous, it has teeth, so you let it pass. Instead, you pull your blanket tighter, ignoring the dampness. You curl your hands under your chin. You listen to the slow breathing of those around you, the faint drip of water near the basin, the soft murmur of a prayer or a song someone hums when they think no one is listening. And just before sleep pulls you under, You wonder, not for the first time, if the Emperor, in all his silks and candlelight, has ever felt the floor beneath him, or if he too dreams of running, even if he has nowhere left to go. You don't remember falling asleep. The dreams were grey again, weightless and unformed, more like the memory of sleep than the thing itself. When you wake, it's not the sound of footsteps or voices that stirs you, but the cold, a deeper chill than usual. It creeps under your blanket like spilled water and presses against your back until your shoulders curl without thinking. Your eyes open slowly, adjusting to the dull early light that creeps through the slit windows high in the wall. The air smells of soot and old water. Someone nearby is already up, rustling through the pile of dry cloths stacked beside the door. No one speaks yet. It's too early for that. Even by the palace's harsh standards, your body feels heavier than it should. Not from rest, but from the residue of the day before. The memory of standing too long, the ache from lifting too much, the silence you wore like another uniform. You roll to your side, careful not to bump the girl who sleeps a few feet away, her arm curled beneath her head, her mouth slightly open. You watch her for a moment, not out of curiosity, but because it's rare to see another worker at peace, even if only briefly. Then you sit up, pull your tunic over your head, and try not to shiver too loudly. You know what today is. You knew the moment you saw the overseer mark your name with the green wax 2 days ago. It's your day in the Hippocaust tunnels. Every worker rotates through them eventually, though no one ever talks about it afterward. The tunnels run beneath the great baths and audience halls, a twisting network of low stone channels that carry heat from the fire chambers to the floors above. They are essential, you're told, sacred even. A marvel of Roman engineering still used centuries after the empire fractured, but you don't think of them as sacred. You think of them as punishment, not for anything you did wrong, just for existing in the wrong place, born into the wrong class, within reach of a palace that needs silent hands and unthanked backs. You're not allowed breakfast before tunnel duty. The firemasters say it slows you down. You accept this like you accept everything else. You drink a bit of water from the shared jug, splash your face with what's left, and follow the older man who leads the way through the lower gate. He doesn't speak to you. He doesn't have to. You know where you're going. The entrance is hidden behind a stacked wall of firewood near the western edge of the kitchen. Most of the courtiers don't know it's there. Some of them think the floors heat themselves through holy blessings. You step carefully down the narrow stairs, ducking low, the air already thick and close despite the early hour. It smells of soot and something older, like the inside of a long-closed tomb. Your shoulder brushes the rough stone wall, and tiny flecks of ash fall into your sleeve. You're already sweating, and the sun hasn't even touched the dome outside. Inside the tunnels, time warps. There is no light but the torch the older man carries, and its flame dances wildly with every shift of his arm. Shadows lurch against the walls like ghosts. The space is tight, no higher than your shoulders in most places. You crawl through some sections, drag your basin through others. Your task today is simple. Sweep debris from the tunnel mouths and check for soot build-up in the flues, but there's nothing simple about it. The heat from the fires is a living thing. It pulses up through the stones, radiating into the narrow space like a furnace turned inside out. Your skin prickles, your breath becomes thin. You try not to cough. The older man doesn't stay. He leaves you near the first flue, handing you a worn brush and a cloth so darkened by smoke it looks like coal. He grunts something that might be good luck or might just be the cough he couldn't suppress. Then he's gone, and you're alone with the quiet roar of heat and your own echoing thoughts. The work is slow and awkward. You lie on your side, your arm twisted at an impossible angle, reaching up into the soot-caked opening of the flue. You brush gently, carefully, trying not to breathe too deeply. Ash rains down in soft flakes, coating your face, your hands, your tongue. Your mouth tastes bitter. You try to ignore it. The brush slips from your hand once and clatters into the shadows. You curse under your breath, not too loudly. The tunnels carry sound like water, and you don't want the wrong ears to hear. You think about the floors above you, about the officials pacing back and forth, discussing tax records and border skirmishes, their sandals warm beneath them, their wine never cold. You wonder if they ever think of what lies beneath, if they know that their comfort requires someone to crawl through smoke and sweat just so their toes won't be chilled. Probably not. Probably none of them could find this tunnel even if they tried. That's how the palace is built, not just with stone and marble, but with layers of ignorance stacked atop sacrifice. You pause between tasks, wiping your face with the back of your sleeve. The sweat has mixed with the ash to form a greasy paste along your neck. You sit in the dim light, your back pressed to the stone, and close your eyes for a moment. Just a moment. The silence here is different than the silence upstairs. It's heavier, more ancient. It presses on your ears until your own heartbeat sounds too loud. You feel the heat like a living breath beneath you, and for a second you imagine the entire palace collapsing in on itself, floor by floor, until it all rests here, in the dark, with you. Eventually you move again, you finish your task, you smear the last bit of soot from the last flue with the cloth, though your arms tremble with the effort. Your knees are raw, your fingertips blistered. But it's done. You make your way back through the low passage, dragging your tools behind you. Your tunic clings to your skin like a second suffocating hide. When you emerge from the tunnel, blinking against the daylight, it feels like rising from the underworld. The older man nods at you. He doesn't ask how it went. He knows. Everyone knows. You return to the quarters after that. No one speaks when you enter. One of the girls hands you a cup of barley water, warm and thin. You drink it in. 3 swallows, trying not to let it dribble down your chin. Your hands shake. You wash your face in the basin, watching the soot swirl away like ink. Then you lie down, not to sleep, but to rest your eyes. Just for a little while. The cot feels strange beneath you, too soft after the stone tunnels. You listen to the sounds of the palace outside, the bells ringing the hour, the chatter of servants on errands, the distant hum of chanting. Life continues, and you, for another day, have endured it. You don't rise again until the bell rings for mid-afternoon meal preparations, and even then, it's only because the overseer's voice echoes down the corridor like a thrown stone. He doesn't need to shout. Just the sharpness in his tone is enough to lift half-asleep bodies off wooden cots and into motion. You roll onto your side first, one arm numb from where it had been pinned beneath your chest, your legs heavy and slow to obey. The cup of barley water still sits beside your bed, empty now but sticky at the rim. You reach for your shoes without thinking, barely aware of your own limbs, and when you pull them on, the familiar ache between your toes returns like a cousin you never invited, but who always finds a way in. The corridor outside the servant quarters smells of oil and bread, and something faintly metallic, maybe from the wine jugs being cleaned somewhere down the line. The light outside has shifted again. You see it through the narrow opening near the top of the stairwell, golden, filtered, lazy in the way it spills across the corridor. There's something deceptive about sunlight in this place. It always looks warmer than it feels. You move through it like a ghost, blending into the rhythm of feet and elbows and quiet sighs. The hallway widens near the upper kitchen, and that's where they've placed you this time. Not to cook, of course. Not even to carry. You're on waste duty again. Scraping skins from vegetable piles, collecting bones into baskets, clearing the mess that the higher-ranked workers have neither time nor desire to manage. Is the kind of work that leaves your fingers smelling of onion and blood. The kind where you catch your own reflection in the polished copper pans, and for a second don't recognise the person looking back. Your hair is matted to your forehead. There's a smear of something yellow along your sleeve, and your hands are shaking again just slightly, like the nerves haven't caught up to your skin yet. You swallow hard and keep scraping. Carrot ends, olive pits, scraps of something that might once have been goat, now indistinguishable from gristle. The basket beside you fills slowly, a small monument to invisibility. Behind you, voices rise again. Not angry this time, just loud. The stewards are laughing about something. You recognise one of the voices, the younger one who always lingers too long when the serving girls pass. He has a way of making everything sound like a joke, even when his eyes are cold. He makes you uneasy, though you've never said why. You wouldn't be believed if you did. You keep your back to him, your hands moving faster. If you're busy enough, maybe he won't see you. Maybe you'll slip between the spaces in his gaze, like you've done so many times before. The palace hums with activity as the day leans toward dusk. The great doors leading to the inner dining halls open and close in steady rhythm, like a breath inhaling and exhaling grandeur. You glimpse the flicker of candlelight bouncing off the gold-leafed icons, the rich velvet drapes drawn back just enough to tease a view of what you'll never enter. You've always found that part strange, how beauty in this place exists right beside the filth, separated only by silence and obedience. You could reach out and touch the wall of the grand hall, feel the same stone beneath your fingers as the emperor's guests, but your fingers would never be clean enough to be welcome inside. You move between tasks without direction now. Once your basket is full, you carry it out to the refuse pit behind the outer garden wall, where broken pottery and spoiled meat share space with the sharp stink of forgotten things. The walk there is long enough to breathe, but not long enough to think. You pass a monk humming a hymn under his breath, his eyes lowered, his pace slow and steady. You wonder what it's like to have purpose, even a quiet one. To wake each morning knowing your voice is welcome somewhere. The thought doesn't linger. You can't afford to dwell on things you'll never be. The refuse pit is full again. It always is. You tip the basket in, careful to avoid the deeper shadows where rats gather. They're not afraid of you. They've grown used to people here, bold enough to dart beneath your feet if you pause too long. You wipe your hands on the inside of your tunic and begin the walk back. Not hurrying, but not sort of stalling either. There's a rhythm to survival in the palace. Too fast and you draw attention. Too slow and you invite punishment. Just steady, quiet movement. That's the key. By the time you return, the smell of roasting meat has overtaken the hallway. Your stomach tightens with hunger, though you know you won't taste any of it. A separate meal is kept for the workers, plain and barely seasoned, but hot enough to keep you going. You'll eat later, when the nobles have finished licking grease from their fingers and complaining about the spice levels. Until then, you wait near the side corridor, standing in place with your hands behind your back, just like you were taught. You don't ask questions. You don't even glance at the plates as they pass. The moment you look too long, they assume you want something, and wanting is dangerous here. You remember once, a few seasons back, a new boy who had only just arrived from one of the outer provinces. He was maybe 12, eager, not yet worn down by the quiet machinery of palace life. He stared too long at a tray of grapes and honeyed nuts, his eyes wide, lips parted slightly. He didn't touch, he didn't ask, he just looked. The steward noticed. That night the boy was taken from the sleeping quarters, and when he returned 3 days later, his hands were wrapped in cloth, his face empty. He worked in silence after that. Some said he had been flogged, others whispered about punishment chambers beneath the cisterns. You never asked. Some stories aren't meant to be repeated, even in the dark. The sky outside shifts again. You don't see it directly, but the shadows on the floor change colour. A richer amber now, stretched long like tired arms. The air cools slightly, and a breeze snakes its way through the narrow window near the stairwell, stirring the corner of the tapestry that hangs just above the servant entrance. You like that moment, brief as it is, the movement, the breath, the reminder that the world outside still exists, that there's air untouched by steam and soot. As evening falls, your body moves more slowly, not because you want to, but because there's no strength left to push against the weight. Every joint feels filled with sand. Your fingers have swollen slightly from the salt of your own sweat, and your knees ache with the memory of bending. But you stay upright. You continue. The tasks don't stop, and neither can you. Not yet. Eventually the bell sounds for shift change. Not freedom, just the next set of steps. You walk back toward the quarters, not speaking to anyone, not looking for comfort. The corridor narrows, as it always does near the basin room, and you brush against the wall there, fingers grazing the groove in the stone worn down by countless hands before yours. You think, not for the first time, about all the people who came before, all the workers whose names were never written, whose sweat still clings to these stones, whose stories dissolved into the silence of the palace. You wonder what they dreamed of, if they dreamed at all, and then you return to your cot. You sit slowly. Your body sighs louder than your breath. You untie your shoes and flex your toes, wincing at the tenderness. The air is cooler now. Someone has lit a small oil lamp at the far end of the room. It flickers quietly, casting soft shadows against the wall. You lie back, your head resting on the thin pillow that smells faintly of smoke and wool. Your arms cross over your chest. You stare up at the ceiling, where the same crack branches like a tree limb, unchanged since yesterday, and you close your eyes, not to dream, just to drift. You awaken before the others, not because of the bell or the shifting feet or even the rustle of cloth from the girl 2 cots away. You waken because of the silence, that particular kind of stillness that only exists just before the world breathes in. The oil lamp at the end of the room has burned low, its flame now barely alive, twitching with every soft breath of air that finds its way in through the cracks in the stone wall. The darkness feels more complete today, not thick exactly, but heavier than usual, like the air has settled around you in layers, each one slightly colder than the last. Your eyes open slowly, not in a hurry. Your body knows better than to move fast after a full day of scraping and bending and lifting. The ache has changed. It's no longer sharp or demanding. It's dull now, settled deep into your muscles like old heat stored in stone. You stretch one leg out from beneath the blanket, testing the morning air. It bites. Of course it does. The cold here is patient. It waits until you let your guard down, then seeps in quietly, claiming your joints before the sun even thinks about rising. You sit up without sound. No one stirs. The others are still locked in the shallow, uneasy sleep that palace workers learn to accept. Not restful, never deep, just enough to keep the body standing. You rub your eyes and lean back slightly, watching the last of the lamp's light dance along the ceiling. For a moment you imagine you're elsewhere. Not far, just enough distance to imagine a quieter room, a thicker blanket, a fire with its own place in the corner, instead of a shared brazier that dies long before morning. But the thought slips away before it can grow roots. You can't afford too much imagination. It spoils the rhythm of obedience. You dress slowly. The tunic is marginally cleaner than yesterday's. Someone must have rinsed it during the night at rotation. You make a mental note to thank them in some small way later, when it's safe. Gratitude can be risky, but silence feels heavier without it. Your shoes are where you left them, still damp, slightly more cracked. You slip them on and wince, and the left one rubs at your heel. The skin there has grown thin. You press your fingers to it gently, then tie the leather cords tighter, hoping that stiffness will keep the pain dull. Outside the quarters, the hall is still dim. A servant carrying a basket of dried rushes passes you without a word. You nod. He doesn't see you, or maybe he chooses not to. You don't blame him. The first hour of the day belongs to silence, not out of respect, but because no one has the strength for conversation. Words are too heavy to carry before the second bell. Your assignment today is different. Not the scullery, not the tunnels, not even the outer kitchens. You've been summoned to assist in the lower archives, a rare change, though not necessarily a welcome one. The archives are cold, even in summer. The stone floors never warm, the torches burn weakly, and the rooms smell of old ink and mildew. But there's a strange reverence to them as well. The people who work there, the scribes, the readers, the older stewards who still remember names from 40 years ago, they move differently, not slower, just more precisely. Their steps echo with purpose. You've always admired that, though you've never said so aloud. You make your way through the winding halls, past the cisterns where moss grows thick on the stones, past the tiny window where morning light dares to sneak in just a sliver at a time. Your breath fogs the air in front of you as you descend the narrow stairs that lead to the archives. At the bottom, the air changes. Drier, thinner, touched by dust. You like it more than you expected. The steward there is an old man with a voice like dried leaves. He nods at you but doesn't smile. You don't mind. You're not here for kindness. He hands you a brush and a cloth, points to the upper shelves that haven't been touched in years. Your job is simple: clean the ledges, dust the bindings, straighten the stacks. Don't move anything without asking, don't read, don't speak, just clean. You start at the far wall, where the scrolls are wrapped in faded linen and tied with thin rope. Some of the bindings crack when you touch them. You handle each one like it's alive, breathing slowly as you wipe the shelves beneath them. The dust is thick, but the work is quiet. And in that silence, something strange begins to happen. Your mind wanders, but not the way it does during kitchen duty or latrine shifts. This time it drifts gently. You wonder what these scrolls contain: decrees, histories, inventories of forgotten battles. The scribes here know, of course, but they guard their knowledge with the same suspicion as a noble guards his purse. Still, you're drawn to the mystery of it. The fact that these shelves have stood longer than most of the people above them. That within these rooms are names no one speaks anymore. Places that might not even exist now except in ink and memory. You wonder, as you brush dust from a wooden beam, if your name will ever be written down somewhere. Not likely, but maybe, just maybe, a worker like you left a mark somewhere. A fingerprint on a scroll, a smudge in the margin, a hair pressed into the wax seal. Small things but real. Invisible but lasting. You lose track of time in the archives. There are no windows here, only the flicker of lamps and the slow change in the tone of the air. It becomes thicker as the day moves on, filled with the warmth of old pages and the quiet scrape of parchment being handled by careful hands. You pause only once, kneeling beside a lower shelf, letting your shoulders rest for a moment. Your fingers are stained with soot from the shelves, but you don't mind. It's cleaner work than most, gentler, more honest in its own way. Eventually the steward calls your name. It sounds strange hearing it spoken aloud. Most days pass without anyone saying it. You rise, wiping your hands against your tunic, and approach. He doesn't thank you. He simply nods and gestures towards the stair. That's enough. Gratitude doesn't have to be loud. Sometimes it's just in the way someone lets you leave without scolding. Back in the main corridor, the light has shifted again. Evening creeps through, the upper halls brushing the tapestries with gold. You walk slowly, your steps dragging just slightly, your body reminding you that even quiet work still weighs something. You pass the chapel on your way back to the quarters. Its door is ajar. You don't go in, you just pause for a breath. Inside, a single candle burns near the altar, casting a gentle glow on the stone floor. It flickers when the wind moves through the crack near the archway. Just for a moment, you feel something soft stir in your chest. Not hope exactly, just space. A little space where breath can go. You reach your cot just before the bell. Others have returned already, some eating, some changing into spare tunics, some just sitting in silence with their backs against the wall. You find your place, lower yourself slowly and exhale. The ache is deeper today, but quieter. Your hands are rough, your feet sore, but your mind is less scattered. The dust of the archive still clings to your sleeves. You almost welcome it. Feels like something ancient reached out and touched you back. As the room dims and the whisper of night settles into the stones, you lie down and close your eyes. The crack in the ceiling is still there, still branching in the same direction, like it too is waiting for something. You watch it until your breath softens and the thoughts begin to blur. And when sleep comes, it comes without weight. Sleep wraps around you like a warm fog, the kind that presses against your limbs and muffles the edges of your dreams. It doesn't come in a rush, it never does. Instead, it arrives in slow pulses, like the tide rising against a shore too tired to resist. You don't dream of anything grand, no golden robes or feast tables or banners fluttering over the sea walls. You dream of stairs, Endless stairs, narrow and worn, and the sound of your own feet echoing downward into shadow. When you wake, you can still hear it faintly, like a memory your body hasn't finished holding. It fades slowly as you sit up, blinking into the quiet, dim-lit morning. The air is heavy, not with heat, but with the quiet kind of tension that usually follows a visit from the upper court. You sense it even before you hear it confirmed. The steward's nephew, one of the younger officials who enjoys the sound of his own voice more than any hymn, muttered last night about a special guest arriving soon. A bishop, or maybe an imperial cousin. No one really knows. What you do know is that when guests arrive, the palace becomes hungrier. It chews up labour faster, demands more polishing, more posture, more audience. The walls must shine, the air must smell of something holy, and no one below the rank of steward is allowed to be seen resting. You rise before the bell, rubbing your palms against your face, brushing away sleep like a second skin. Your feet still ache from yesterday, but it's a dull, manageable ache. The kind you've grown used to, the kind that walks with you instead of holding you. Back! You change quickly, fingers fumbling slightly in the dim light, and step out into the corridor before the others stir. The air is cooler than usual, and you breathe it in deeply, letting the stillness calm you before the rush of expectation arrives. There's a strange beauty to the palace at this hour. No nobles, no stewards barking orders, just stone and shadow, and the distant sound of water dripping from somewhere unseen. Your first task is one you've done only twice before, though you remember every detail of it. The outer vestibule of the Empress's reception hall needs to be swept, oiled, and polished before the 6th bell. The marble there is finer than anywhere else in the palace, deep green veined with gold, the kind of stone imported generations ago from far beyond the empire's edges. You're not allowed to speak while you clean it. No cloths with frayed edges, no water buckets set down hard. Every movement must be smooth, almost graceful, as if you're not cleaning at all but performing a slow, silent dance meant to impress the stones themselves. The vestibule is empty when you arrive, though the torches have already been lit. They cast a warm amber glow across the floor, revealing every speck of dust, every dull patch where the shine has faded. You kneel at the edge of the hall, place your tools in a neat row beside you, and begin. First, the dry sweep. You guide the soft bristled broom across the surface in wide arcs, careful not to rush. The dust gathers quietly, obediently, then the oil, rubbed in with cloth so fine they're kept in a separate linen box, locked between uses. You work in circles, small and steady, until the marble begins to glisten beneath your fingers. By the time the 6th bell rings, your knees are numb, your arms sore, and the floor behind you gleams like still water. The overseer passes through once, his eyes sweeping the space, his mouth pressed in a tight, unreadable line. He doesn't stop, doesn't speak. That's how you know you did well. Praise is loud in other places. Here, silence is the reward. Later, as the palace stirs to full wakefulness, you're sent to the hallway near the bathing chambers. Not inside, never got inside. That space is for the adorned, the scented, the titled, but outside the towels must be folded, the floors mopped dry, the incense pots refreshed. You move with care, avoiding eye contact with the eunuchs who pass by, their robes swaying softly, their expressions carved from calm. One of them drops a coin as he turns the corner. You see it spin across the floor, a tiny glint of gold against the stone. You don't pick it up, not because you aren't tempted, but because it's a test. It always is. By midday, the guest has arrived. You hear it in the change of sound first, louder footsteps, more layers of fabric swishing past. Voices speaking in the polished Greek of the capital rather than the muttered dialects of the workers. The tension thickens. No one lingers in hallways. No one eats where they can be seen. You retreat to the shadow of a column near the eastern corridor and begin cleaning the lampstands, working your way upward with the soft cloth and beeswax polish. The brass is warm from the sunlight, and as you rub it clean, your reflection wavers back at you. It's not a face you recognise, not in detail. The soot, the sweat, the shadows beneath your eyes, they all blur the lines, make you look older, distant, like someone remembered more than known. When the visitors pass, you bow your head low, eyes fixed on the floor. You don't see them, not really, but you smell them. Clove oil, jasmine, wine-soaked wool. Their presence lingers in the air long after they've gone. You don't look up until the corridor falls silent again. And even then, your movements stay small, controlled. You've seen what happens to those who forget themselves in the presence of power. Even a glance can be mistaken for insolence. The rest of the day blurs in a series of tasks, clearing the side court of debris left by the storm 2 nights ago, assisting the older worker with repairs to a broken tile near the entrance to the treasury, fetching hot water for the upper kitchens where the sauces for dinner must simmer without interruption. You lose count of the steps you take, the cloths you rinse, the quiet nods exchanged with others like you. It's a language of silence, this life, a network of shared glances, barely their gestures, small mercies passed hand to hand without a word. By the time dusk arrives, the palace has settled into its evening rhythms. The great hall glows with candlelight. The scent of roast lamb and spiced wine fills the air, but you're already in the lower quarters, seated cross-legged on the floor with a chipped bowl in your lap. Barley stew, thickened with turnip and a bit of lentil. No bread tonight. Supplies have been short since the shipment from Galatia was delayed. You eat slowly, savouring the warmth more than the flavour, letting the quiet conversation around you wash over like a river too soft to disturb your thoughts. Later you lie down again in your cot, your arms folded beneath your head, your legs stretched out across the scratchy wool blanket. The ceiling crack still branches across the stone like a silent reminder of time's weight, and this time you trace it with your eyes from end to end, as if following the story of someone else's life. You wonder, quietly, what the Empress sees when she looks at the same sky you've never touched. If she knows that beneath her throne are corridors full of workers who have never spoken her name aloud except in prayer or fear. If she feels anything at all when she walks across the marble that your hands polished smooth. Sleep takes longer to arrive tonight, but when it does, it's deeper than usual. There's a comfort in exhaustion that mimics peace. Your body remembers the movements of the day even as your mind lets them go, and in that surrender, something like rest begins to bloom. You wake before the others again, not because your body is rested, but because your mind has learned to rise just before the world asks it to. There is something solemn in the way the darkness lingers this morning, slower to lift, as if the sky itself is unsure of how to begin the day. You sit up slowly, careful not to disturb the blanket too much, your fingers stiff from the damp chill that settled in during the night. The stone floor beneath your cot is colder than usual, biting at your heels as you stand and stretch quietly. Around you, the others are still curled in their cots, faces turned away, breaths soft and even. In this hour, before orders are barked and tasks assigned, there is a rare stillness that wraps the room like a worn-out shawl. It's not peace exactly, but it is silence, and that is precious. You make your way to the basin at the far end of the quarters, dipping your hands into the water that's already grown tepid with the morning's air. The chill is bracing, and for a moment it makes you draw in your breath too sharply, the sound echoing in the quiet. No one stirs. You rinse your face, letting the water wash away the last traces of sleep, then dry your hands on the cloth tucked into your belt. The skin on your fingers is cracked in places, tender in others. You study them as you dress. These hands have lifted, scrubbed, carried, peeled, polished and bowed. They've never held anything delicate, not really. And yet they know the weight of everything that moves through this palace, from firewood to prayer books. You're summoned to the outer wall this morning. The drainage channel near the garden cistern is clogged again, and the steward wants it cleared before the rain begins. You gather your tools, sling the worn satchel across your shoulder, and walk the long corridor that leads to the east wing. The palace is still in the soft hush of dawn, the halls half lit, the light from the torches catching on damp patches of wall where condensation has kissed the stone. You pass the kitchen corridor and smell the beginnings of breakfast, with flatbread cooking on iron. The slight burn of yesterday's ashes stirred into new fire. You pass the scriptorium's sealed door, behind which the scribes are already scratching the world into ink. And finally you reach the small archway that leads outside, where air and sky greet you with a cold breath. The garden path is slick with dew, the stones beneath your feet uneven from years of shifting under weather and footfall. The scent here is different, more earthy, more real. You breathe it in deeply, letting the green sharpness of the hedges and wet soil push the weight of the past few days from your chest. The drainage trench sits low near the back edge of the wall, a forgotten seam in the stonework that only gets noticed when it fails to do its job. You kneel beside it and begin to dig through the accumulated leaves, the scraps of cloth caught on the edges, the silt that forms a stubborn skin just beneath the surface. Your hands grow cold again, but they work steadily, scraping and scooping, brushing and lifting. There is a rhythm to this too, and in it you find a strange quiet. Not contentment, but something close to it. As you work, you listen to the garden wake. Birds stir in the fig tree near the gate, their calls soft and hesitant. A breeze rustles the upper branches, and a handful of early blooms shake dew from their petals. You pause, wiping your hands on your tunic, and look toward the wall where ivy climbs in crooked threads. There's a patch there, near the bottom, where the stone has worn smooth from time and touch. You've seen it before. Every worker has. Some say a servant once carved their name there, though it's long since worn away. Others whisper that it's where someone escaped years ago, slipping through the gap in the wall and vanishing into the city. You don't believe the story, but you still find your fingers drifting towards the spot, brushing it gently as if it might answer you. The steward arrives just before the second bell. He doesn't greet you, just checks your work, grunts once and moves on. You don't expect thanks. In truth, you almost prefer the silence. Gratitude from above feels dangerous, like a light pointed in your direction when you've spent years learning to move in shadow. You finish the trench, cover the exposed edge with clean cloth to catch new debris, and gather your tools. As you stand, your back creaks like an old gate, and you press a hand to the small of it, massaging the stiffness into submission. Then you walk slowly toward the main corridor, boots scraping against wet stone, breath leaving soft clouds in the cold air. The midday tasks are quieter. You're sent to the linen room to assist with folding and stacking, a job reserved for those who move carefully and speak even less. The room is narrow, lined with shelves filled with rolled cloth and baskets of lavender meant to keep moths at bay. You work beside an older woman whose name you've never learned, but whose hands are so precise they seem to move before the cloth can wrinkle. She doesn't speak, only nods when you finish a stack. There is comfort in this silence, in the measured movements, in the scent of clean fabric and dried herbs. For a few hours you feel less like a shadow and more like a thread in something whole. When you break for a meal, it's in the far courtyard, beneath a cypress tree that leans slightly from years of wind. You sit with your back against the rough bark, bowl balanced in your lap, steam rising in soft wisps. The food is better than usual today. A thicker stew, a crust of bread still warm from the morning's fire. You eat slowly, savouring each bite, letting the warmth travel from your belly to your fingers. A boy sits nearby not speaking, just picking at his bread and watching the way the sunlight moves through the leaves. You catch his gaze once, offer a small smile. He doesn't return it, but he doesn't look away either. That's something. By late afternoon, your tasks return to the inner halls. You polish the base of a column near the chapel, sweep the fallen wax chips from beneath a row of votive stands, carry a bucket of warm water to the infirmary, where a clerk nurses a bruised hand. Each task is small, nearly invisible. But you perform them with care, because even invisible things leave marks. The palace, for all its grandeur, is held together by hands like yours, rough, unseen, calloused, and quiet. As night settles in again, and the bells chime their soft song across the stone, you find yourself back in the corridor that leads to your quarters. The light is low and the air has turned colder. You pause at the corner near the stairwell, where the wall curves in just enough to hide a person. You stand there for a moment, leaning slightly, letting the silence wash over you. No one sees you. No one calls your name. For these few seconds, you're free. Then you move again, back through the door, back to the cot, back to the blanket that still smells faintly of ashen wool. You lie down, arms folded over your chest, and stare at the ceiling. The crack above you hasn't moved, but something about it looks softer tonight. Or maybe your eyes are just too tired to see the edges. You breathe in once, slowly, then again. The world around you fades into stillness, and as sleep begins to fold itself over your shoulders, you whisper a thought, not a prayer, not a wish, just a single quiet thought that maybe, just maybe, the walls will remember you when you're gone. Sleep comes without a fight, curling itself gently around your limbs like an old friend who knows not to knock. You do not dream this time, or if you do, the dream slips away before you can find its shape. All that remains is a feeling, something like warmth, the ghost of a memory that never fully formed. When you wake, the light is different. Not the pale blue of dawn or the cold hush of pre-dawn hours. It is golden, almost amber, spilling softly through the narrow window above the door like warm honey poured onto stone. It surprises you, that light. It feels unearned, as if something gentle has wandered into your world by mistake. You sit up slowly, blinking against it, your hands moving by habit to fold the thin blanket back into its place. Your body feels less heavy today, though not lighter, just different. As if the fatigue has sunk so deeply into your bones that your muscles no longer bother to complain. Around you, others are rising, quiet as ever, brushing their hair back with wet fingers, lacing boots with practice speed. The room smells of smoke and wool and something vaguely herbal, probably from the wash water someone boiled early. You nod once at the girl who hands you your tunic, and she nods back. No one speaks. There's no need. When you step into the corridor, though, golden light follows, bouncing off the mosaic tiles in a way that makes the floor look cleaner than it is. You walk slowly, not because you're tired, but because the stillness feels sacred. For just a few heartbeats, you are not rushing. You're not hurrying towards someone else's demands. You're simply moving through the quiet, and that is enough. Your first task today is in the Hall of Icons. It is one of the oldest parts of the palace, older even than the golden dome and the silver-veined throne room. The hall is narrow, flanked by wooden panels carved with the faces of saints and martyrs, their eyes too large, their mouths too still. You've always found it unsettling the way they stare down at you from the shadows, as if they're waiting for you to confess something you don't have words for. You're not allowed to touch the icons, not even with a cloth. Your job is to clean the floor beneath them, to brush away the dust that settles like forgotten blessings, to polish the bronze sconces that hold the lamps lit in their honour. You kneel slowly, your knees pressing into the chill of the stone. The scent here is different from the rest of the palace. Resin and smoke and old wood, with a sharp edge of something bitter, like dried myrrh. As you move the cloth across the floor, careful not to scrape, you listen to the way your breath sounds in the stillness. It echoes slightly, but not with sharpness, more like a whisper returning from the wall, a memory returning to itself. Halfway through the corridor you pause, not because you are tired, but because something catches your eye. A flicker in the bronze, maybe, or the way the sunlight lands on the floor just in front of the panel depicting St. Theodora. You've passed this icon dozens of times. You've polished beneath it. You've lit the lamp beside it. But today, the light hits it in such a way that you notice a detail you hadn't before. In the carved folds of her robe there's a faint scratch, not from time but from a hand. A small mark, shallow but deliberate. A letter maybe, or a symbol. You lean in closer, careful not to touch, squinting against the light. It's not recent. The dust has settled into it. Whatever it is, it's old, forgotten, like so many things here. You finish your task without telling anyone what you saw, not because it's a secret, but because the palace is built on things not said aloud. Some things are too small to matter to the people above, but too sacred to be shared among those below. So you carry it with you, like a stone in your pocket. Something solid, something that doesn't belong to anyone but you. The rest of the morning is spent assisting the steward's aide with the inventories. Not the gold, not the scrolls. You're not trusted with things that weigh that heavily. You're assigned to the storeroom beneath the audience chamber, where ceremonial linens are folded and counted, where candles are sorted by length and burn time, where the silver goblets no longer bright enough for service are wrapped in cloth and placed out of sight. The aide is brisk but not unkind. He reads aloud from a list and you answer with quiet yeses, with numbers counted twice. Your fingers move automatically, folding the cloth just so, aligning the edges, stacking them by size. The silence between you is comfortable, like the hush between pages turning. During the midday bell, you are given half an hour of rest. You don't spend it eating. The food is late today, something about the ovens needing to be cleaned. You take your time instead near the northern courtyard, where the pomegranate tree still clings to its last few leaves. The branches are bare in places, and the ground beneath it is littered with half-crushed fruit, staining the stone with deep red blotches. You sit on the low wall near the edge of the fountain, your hands in your lap, and listen to the wind threading through the dry leaves. A few workers pass by, nodding to one another, their faces worn in the same familiar pattern. You watch them without moving. You feel less like a person and more like part of the stone today, still present, unchanging. The rest of the afternoon blurs with movement. You carry basin after basin from the washroom to the upper hall, your arms trembling only slightly now. You help sweep the garden path for the Empress's physician, whose sandals are always too clean for the ground he walks on. You refill the oil in the lamps near the reading alcove. You brush cobwebs from the corners of the great bronze doors. None of it matters, not in any grand way, but it fills the hours, and in the palace, hours are currency. The more of them you spend quietly, efficiently, the safer you are. At dusk, you return to your quarters. The room is warm today, someone having managed to keep the brazier lit longer than usual. You sit on your cot and remove your shoes slowly, flexing your toes, rubbing the arch of your foot where the ache has deepened. A thin bowl of lentil soup is passed your way, and you eat it with a slice of dry bread, dipping the crust into the broth to soften it. The taste is plain, but it grounds you, reminds you that you are still here. As the light dims further, someone lights the lamp near the corner. Its flame flickers weakly, throwing shadows that dance across the cracked ceiling. You lie back slowly, resting your head on the pillow, staring up at the place where the crack begins to split. It looks different again tonight. Maybe wider, maybe not. Maybe it's just the way the light catches it, or maybe it's just your eyes playing tricks after too long without rest. Either way, you watch it until your breath begins to slow, until your thoughts begin to lose their edges. You close your eyes, not to escape, but to drift, to float back into the quiet, into the place where the light still falls like honey on stone, where hands that scrubbed floors and folded linens might still carry the memory of their own names, where even the smallest breath is enough. When morning comes, it does not announce itself with bells or voices, but with the soft shuffle of feet against stone and the distant scrape of a wooden ladle stirring something thick in a copper pot. You blink yourself awake slowly, the weight of the blanket a small comfort across your chest. The air smells of something warm today, richer than usual, touched faintly by the scent of boiled wine and roasted roots. Someone in the upper kitchens must be preparing for another evening gathering, and the perfumes of anticipation always drift downward, settling in your quarters like ghosts of a feast you'll never see. You lie still for a few moments longer, eyes half open, watching the way light begins to press its fingers through the cracks in the shutters. It is a pale light, Not the golden kind that warms, but the ashen glow of a day that might carry rain. You rise before the others again, not out of eagerness, but from habit. Moving early gives you a sliver of time when the corridors are still yours, when no one is watching, no one judging the speed of your steps or the exact angle of your bow. These are the moments when you almost feel like a person instead of a cog in someone else's machine. You dress in the same way you always do, layering tunic over shirt, cinching the cord at your waist, slipping your worn shoes on with a sigh. The ache in your joints is less pronounced today, though it sits quietly in your knees, reminding you that comfort is a luxury you gave up years ago. Your task tug takes you to the southern wing, a section of the palace you rarely enter. It is quieter there, though not in the peaceful sense. More in the way that chapels are quiet, or tombs. The walls are lined with faded murals, chipped at the edges, the faces of saints and soldiers peeling like old bark from ancient trees. You are assigned to assist one of the court scribes who has requested an extra set of hands to help organise scrolls sent from the library at the great church. You are not expected to understand their contents, only to carry and place them in the correct shelves and ensure the room is swept and free of soot. Still, the chance to touch something that has travelled through minds brighter and further reaching than your own leaves a strange flutter in your chest. You do not know much about the world beyond these walls, but the scrolls do. And somehow touching them feels like brushing the hem of something eternal. The scribe is young, younger than you expected, his hands too clean for someone who handles ink all day. He speaks softly, with a dialect shaped by the upper districts, and avoids eye contact when he hands you the first bundle. You accept it without a word, nodding slightly, and begin your work. The room is warmer than you expected, filled with the scent of old parchment, beeswax, and something bickish that lingers faintly near the entrance. Perhaps cloves or cinnamon oil carried in from someone's sleeve. You walk between the shelves with quiet steps, your fingertips tracing the edges of wood worn smooth by decades of careful hands. It feels like walking through memory, each scroll a whisper, each shelf a prayer. Hours pass unnoticed, marked only by the slow dimming of the light and the tightening of your back. The scribe says little, but you can feel his presence behind you, reading, writing, occasionally coughing into a cloth with more politeness than necessity. At one point he offers you a cup of watered wine, cool and bitter, and you accept it with a soft thank you. It is the first time you've spoken today, and your voice feels strange, like a cloak you haven't worn in a while. The wine cuts through your dryness, but not your caution. You sip it slowly and return to your task, folding the moment of kindness into a quiet place inside you where you keep small treasures. By the time you're dismissed, the corridors have shifted again. The hum of the palace has grown louder, footsteps brisker, conversation snappier. Someone important must be moving through the upper halls, and the rest of the building has leaned into attention. You walk a different path back, avoiding the central passage, instead choosing a quieter route through the storage vaults. It's darker there, lit only by a few torches and the fading light from small arched windows placed too high to reach. You pass crates filled with jars of preserved figs, sacks of flour tied neatly at the mouth, baskets of dried herbs hanging from hooks in the rafters. The scent is comforting, earthy and rich, like the breath of the countryside carried into the walls of the city. When you reach your quarters, the room is half empty. Some are still out, finishing their tasks or waiting for their turn at the baths. You sit on the edge of your cot, unlacing your shoes slowly, letting your feet breathe. The soles of your socks are damp, and you peel them off with a wince, flexing your toes against the cool stone. You eat a piece of flatbread left on your blanket, torn from someone's ration earlier, and chew it without much thought. Hunger has become a quiet companion, always present but never screaming, just there, like the crack above your bed, like the ache in your hands, like the soft breath you take before sleep. You lie down as the lamp across the room is lit. Its glow is small but enough to cast shadows across the faces near you. You close your eyes, listening to the murmur of voices softening into silence. Someone is humming a melody you do not recognize, low and slow, the kind of song meant for rocking a child to sleep. It curls around the room like incense, settling into your thoughts. You let it fill you as the day unspools behind your closed lids, and the memory of parchment, warm breath, and golden light drifts into the quiet. And once again, you drift too. Sleep holds you lightly this time, not tight like a blanket, but more like a veil drifting just above your skin. It never quite anchors you, never quite lets you sink, as if your body and mind both know that something is different today, even if they can't say what. The air feels restless, even in the stillness of the sleeping quarters. You can hear it in the way the wind brushes across the window ledge, whistling faintly through a crack in the wooden frame. The sound threads its way through your thoughts, tugging gently at the edges of sleep until you open your eyes again. It is still dark, though not the deep, endless dark of midnight. This is the lighter sort, the kind that hints at the coming dawn, not with colour, but with softness. You lie still for a while, your hands resting on your chest, your breath slow and measured. The floor creaks faintly as someone shifts in their cot across the room, and the smell of spent oil and burned tallow drifts up from the lamp stub near the door. You sit up slowly, blinking away the blur, and rub your hands together for warmth. The room is cold again. The brazier must have gone out early. You make a mental note to relight it if you return early enough tonight. These thoughts pass through your mind not with urgency, but as soft reminders, the kind that belong to a life lived in quiet corners. When you're summoned this morning, it is not by your usual overseer. A different steward waits at the threshold dressed in darker robes, his belt fastened with a different clasp than the one you know. He doesn't call your name, but gestures sharp and quick, then turns before you can ask a question. You follow without speaking, your feet quiet on the stone, your mind beginning to sift through the possible reasons for the change. He leads you deeper into the southern wing, past storerooms you've never entered, through doors that are usually closed and barred. The air grows cooler the farther you walk, and you notice the light changing too, less golden, more silvered, like the halls here remember a different kind of sun. Eventually you reach the Treasury Annex. You've heard of it, of course. Everyone has. Not the main vault where the Empire's coin and relics are guarded, but the quieter wing where ceremonial items are kept, where old gifts from foreign courts lie behind lattice screens and heavy wooden doors. The steward says nothing as he unlocks the gate and steps aside. He hands you a cloth, a small jar of wax and a soft brush, then simply points to the bronze gratings that line the upper part of the wall. They've dulled, he tells you. They need their shine back. You nod once, accepting the task without question. As he leaves, the door groans shut behind him, and the quiet that follows is unlike any you've known in the palace. It is thick, almost ancient, the kind of silence that makes your breath feel too loud. You look around, taking in the soft gleam of metals, the glint of gilded cups behind glass, the scrollwork along the edges of forgotten blades. These are things made to be seen, not touched, and yet here you are, dusting their guardians, brushing clean the bronze that stands between them and the air. You begin at the far end, careful to move slowly. The grating is delicate, its patterns intricate, almost lace-like in their precision. As you work the wax into the grooves, the scent of it rises, a mixture of resin, smoke, and something faintly sweet like old myrtle leaves. The brush moves with a soft whisper against the metal, and for a time the world outside these walls falls away. You think only of the rhythm, the curve of the design, the small flecks of dust lifting into the air and disappearing into the light. Hours pass this way. Your knees ache from kneeling on the stone. Your fingers grow slick with wax. Your arms sore from reaching and polishing. There is something calming in the repetition, something whole in the smallness of the task. You feel invisible here, but in a different way than usual. Not erased, but hidden. Protected. Like the stone has wrapped around you for a time and offered you a place to simply be. Eventually you pause to rest. You sit back on your heels, brush in your lap, and gaze at the nearest object behind the grate. It is a censer, silver and wide-bellied, with tiny holes punched in its lid in the shape of stars. You wonder when it was last used and by whom. You wonder if the smoke that once poured from it ever reached your part of the palace, if the prayers spoken above it ever echoed down to where you scrubbed floors. The thought lingers, soft and strange, until it fades like everything else. When the steward returns, he does not speak. He looks over your work, nods once, and gestures for you to follow. You do, brushing the last of the wax from your fingers onto your cloth. You are led back through the halls, but this time the path feels shorter, more direct. The light has shifted again, and the wind through the windows has died. The day has turned, though you're not sure when. Time inside the palace does not move in hours, but in tasks completed, in dust removed, in silences shared between footsteps. Back in your own corridor, you pause before returning to your quarters. Instead, you sit for a moment at the edge of the hallway where the sunlight stretches across the floor like a ribbon of warmth. You let it touch your fingers, your knees, your face. You close your eyes and let yourself exist without movement, without thought. Just breath. Just light. Later, in the quiet of the room where you sleep, you curl up beneath your blanket and think of the bronze grates, of the silent treasures they hide, of the way the wax caught the light like fire trapped in honey. You wonder what else is hidden in the palace, not behind locks or screens, but in the spaces between all of you, in the words not said, in the glances exchanged, in the soft human truths that keep you all tethered to one another despite the silence. You let that thought hold you as your breath slows. Let it anchor you. Let it carry you into the soft, grey dark of sleep once more. The next morning breaks slowly, as though reluctant to arrive. You feel it in your bones before your eyes open, a kind of hesitance in the air that makes even the light seem drowsy. When you finally stir, the room is still half in shadow. The lamp in the far corner has burned out completely, leaving behind a ring of soot and a long curl of smoke that seems frozen in the air. Someone breathes deeply a few cots away. Another shifts in sleep, letting out a faint murmur before sinking back under their blanket. The day hasn't fully begun yet, but it's on its way, stretching itself awake one breath at a time. You sit up and swing your legs over the edge of the cot, your feet meeting the stone floor with their usual resistance. The cold is always sharpest in the mornings, but by now you've grown used to that first bite. It doesn't shock you anymore. It simply enters you, a quiet reminder that the body must wake whether the mind is ready or not. You dress quickly, layering tunic over thin undershirt, wrapping the worn cord twice around your waist, tucking it tightly. Each motion is done with a slowness that is not laziness but care, a ritual of sorts, one that anchors you before the demands of the day begin pulling at your shoulders. Outside, the corridor is nearly empty. Only the sound of your footsteps and the faint whisper of wind stirring near the arches breaks the stillness. The palace hasn't fully stirred yet. That too is something you treasure. The early hour when everything feels suspended between breath and command, between sleep and expectation. You take a longer route toward the storerooms, letting your eyes linger on the light pooling along the stone, the way it brightens the edges of the mosaic tiles like liquid gold finding old channels. You catch your own reflection briefly in the polished bronze of a door plate. The face that looks back is quiet, lined not with age, but with the wear of repetition. You do not look sad, just worn like something that's been used often, cared for gently and rarely spoken of. You are sent to the lantern keeper today, a post you have heard about but never been assigned to. The lanterns throughout the eastern halls are his responsibility, hundreds of them, each needing to be cleaned, refilled, lit and adjusted. It's a quiet job, solitary, demanding more patience than strength. The man who tends them is older than most stewards, his hair a soft, smoky grey, his movements measured as though he speaks in silence even when words leave his mouth. When you arrive, he gives you a nod, not of greeting, but of recognition. Then he gestures for you to follow. You trail behind him through narrow halls and passageways most people in the palace never see. These are service paths, shortcuts that wind between kitchens, dormitories, armories, and prayer alcoves. The stone here is darker, older. It smells of oil and clay and something faintly metallic. At regular intervals, he stops to check the lanterns, lifting the glass, trimming the wick, pouring fresh oil from a leather flask. Each movement is slow, deliberate. You watch carefully, then mimic his actions when he hands you the tools without a word. The lanterns are different than the ones in the common halls. Some are shaped like bells, others like small domes, each with its own particular latch and hinge. Your fingers learn quickly. They have always been good at remembering shape and pressure. As you work, the silence between you and the lantern keeper stretches wide, but it does not feel empty. It feels shared. There is something comforting in the way he doesn't speak, doesn't fill the space with unnecessary noise. You find that you prefer it. The rhythm of lighting and refilling, cleaning and adjusting becomes a kind of prayer, a motion that speaks of care without needing voice. As you tend to each small flame, you begin to notice things you hadn't before. The way light dances against the curve of the glass, the smell of a freshly lit wick, sharp and smoky at first, then softening into warmth. The glow it casts onto the walls, tracing the edges of forgotten carvings and old plaster. These lanterns hold the memory of 1,000 footsteps passing by, 1,000 whispers heard but not repeated. At midday the keeper pauses, placing a small cloth bundle on the ledge beside him. He unties it slowly, revealing a crust of bread, a wedge of dried fig, and a strip of cured meat. He offers you half without speaking, and you accept it the same way. You sit together on the edge of a narrow alcove, your feet dangling above the steps below, and eat in silence. The food is simple but filling, and the act of sharing it makes it taste better. You chew slowly, watching the way the light from a nearby lantern flickers against the far wall. The flame stutters slightly, caught by a draught, then steadies. It seems almost alive. And for a moment, you imagine the lantern as a heart quietly burning, steadying the rhythm of the palace's forgotten places. Later, as the sun begins to lower behind the high walls, you return to the main halls with him, tending the last row of lanterns near the chapel. The scent here is different. Incense, frankincense, beeswax. The flames seem gentler, as if they know they're in the presence of prayer. You kneel beside one near the altar alcove, cleaning the soot from the glass, adjusting the wick with careful fingers. Behind you, a soft voice hums a hymn, not for show, not for audience, just out of habit. The sound is fragile, almost transparent. You do not turn to see who it is. You let the song exist around you like air warmed by the light. When the final flame is lit, the keeper nods again, places a hand briefly on your shoulder, then vanishes down one of the back halls without another word. You stand there for a moment, alone with the glow, the stillness curling around your shoulders like a cloak. The palace feels different at this hour, less demanding, more human. You walk back to your quarters slowly, letting the weight of the day settle gently against your bones. When you arrive, most of the others are already resting, soft voices weaving in and out of sleep. You lie down and pull the blanket over you, your hands still faintly scented with oil and soot. You stare up at the ceiling where the crack has deepened into something familiar, almost comforting in its constancy. The room flickers with the last of the lamplight, and you think just before sleep begins to gather you of all the flames you tended today, the ones no one noticed, but which lit the halls for others, small lights, quiet work, and as you close your eyes, you carry that warmth with you. You wake to the sound of dripping water, not the hurried kind that follows rain, but the slow, deliberate plink of droplets landing into a hollow basin somewhere out of sight. The rhythm of it guides your breath as you stir beneath a thin blanket, your arms stretching instinctively before your eyes open. The morning is quiet again, heavy with the sort of silence that makes you feel as though the palace is still deciding whether it wishes to wake. You rise slowly, rubbing your palms together, feeling the roughness in your skin catch against itself like sandpaper, a familiar texture now. The floor is cold beneath your feet, and the air smells faintly of wet stone and old smoke. The brazier must have been lit briefly during the night, enough to burn some warmth into the room before letting the chill reclaim it. As you step into the corridor, the lanterns from yesterday's work still burn low and steady. Their glow is weaker now, close to fading, but the memory of their full light lingers. You pass them with a small glance, feeling something like pride settle quietly in your chest. No one saw you light them. No one knows it was your hands that steadied the wicks. But you know, and that's enough. There is a strange, small comfort in silent contribution. Today's assignment takes you to the Corridor of Pale Echoes. That is not its official name, of course. The steward called it simply the Western Passage, but among the workers it carries that softer title. It's a long, narrow hall that curves around the outer wall of the palace near the older stables and the lesser kitchens. Its stone is lighter than elsewhere, more ivory than grey, and the ceiling is unusually high for a space meant only for service use. Some say it was once a gallery or a part of the Emperor's first council wing, long ago repurposed when the palace grew too large to remember all its limbs. Others whisper of accidents, of stories buried beneath whitewashed stone. But no one speaks of it during daylight hours, and few are assigned to it. When you were called for this task, a few glances passed among the others, though no words followed. The corridor asks for silence. It demands it, in fact. You are tasked with scrubbing the base of the walls where the stone has begun to darken from years of neglect. The steward provides a bucket, thick with a milky cleaning solution that smells sharply of vinegar and bitter herbs, and a stiff brush. No cloth, no gloves. You are to work from one end of the corridor to the other, and to finish before the fourth bell. He leaves you there with a curt nod, the door shutting softly behind him, and then you're alone. The first thing you notice is how sound carries here, not with volume but with weight. Each scrape of the brush against the stone echoes faintly down the hall and back to you. Each breath feels magnified, each motion folded into itself. The space feels alive in a way the others don't, like it listens more carefully. You kneel at the far end and dip the brush into the mixture, then press it against the wall with slow, steady pressure. The solution runs down in thin rivulets, and as you scrub, the stone begins to lighten, not by much, but enough that you can see the difference. That alone encourages you to continue. The work is slow, the walls are rough, uneven, and every few feet you must pause to shift the bucket, to re-wet the brush, to rest your fingers. But in that slowness you begin to notice things, small details that would otherwise be swallowed by haste. There is a crack in the mortar halfway along the corridor, shaped almost like a feather. A mark near the base of a pillar that could be a name, carved hastily in a language you don't read. You find a bent hairpin caught between two stones, rusted and fragile, a relic from someone who passed this way long before you. These things are not part of your task, but they become part of your morning, small conversations shared silently with the corridor itself. As you work your way down the hall, the light shifts. The windows here are narrow, high up, and the sun slants through them in long pale beams that seem to drift rather than fall. Dust hangs in the air, catching the light like soft threads of silk. You pause in the middle of the hall and watch them float, feeling your breath slow. For a moment, everything feels suspended, the brush loose in your hand, your knees resting on the damp cloth you placed earlier. Time moves differently here. Not in hours or bells, but in strokes of a brush, in breaths drawn between echoes. By the time you reach the final panel, your arms are sore, your knees damp, and your hands stained with a faint brown ring from where the water has soaked your sleeves. But the wall is clean now. It gleams faintly in the soft light. Not perfect, but better. Cared for. Seen. You sit back on your heels, exhaling slowly, and listen. There is no applause, no praise, just the soft hush of the corridor, breathing with ye. That is all. And it is enough. You rinse your brush at the basin near the door and return the bucket to the storeroom, placing it gently beside the others, careful not to splash. No one is waiting for you, no one checks your work, you pass ye. through the palace again like a shadow slipping between walls, unnoticed but semi-steady. You eat a quiet meal alone near the lower kitchen door, barley and onion porridge with a few thin strips of dried lamb, and drink warm water that tastes faintly of clay. The day passes you not with urgency but with rhythm, and you match it stride for stride. That night, as you settle onto your cot, you feel a new kind of ache, not painful but deep, like your body has folded the memory of the corridor into its bones. You think of the sound of the brush, the way your breath echoed back to you, the way the light moved through dust like a slow dance. You think of how the stone looked when it was clean. You close your eyes, and the corridor lives there still. You sleep deeply that night, not out of comfort, but exhaustion, the kind that settles behind your ribs and folds itself into your breath. When you wake, your body feels wrapped in stone, heavy and unwilling to rise. But the bell calls from the far end of the hall, thin and hollow, like it too is reluctant to begin. You open your eyes slowly, letting the grainy light of dawn creep in, and stretch your fingers one at a time. They are stiff from yesterday's work, but not swollen. That small mercy is enough to coax you upright. The room is quieter than usual. Several cots lie empty, their blankets folded or left in haste, and the silence that fills the space is not the restful kind, but the expectant kind, the kind that feels like a held breath. You move slowly through the morning routine, washing your face at the stone basin, brushing the dust from your tunic, tightening the cord at your waist. As you pass through the corridor, a steward you do not know calls you by a name close to yours, but not quite right. You stop, nod once, and follow without correcting him. Names slip easily in the palace. What matters is that someone is there to answer when called. He leads you through a passage you've never walked before. It cuts behind the old baths, past the sealed entrance to the winter cloister, and into a part of the palace that feels forgotten by time. The walls are narrower, the air cooler, touched by something mineral and raw. You pass small arched doorways that open into storage rooms filled with clay pots and stacked crates, and eventually come to a thick wooden door reinforced with iron strips. The steward pauses, reaches for a key, and without a word unlocks it and pushes it open. Inside is the salt room. You've heard of it, though only in passing. A long, low space beneath the southern kitchens where blocks of salt are stored, both for trade and for preserving meat through the colder months. It is colder here than anywhere else in the palace, and your breath fogs before you with each exhale. The floor is packed earth, and the walls are lined with stone shelves that cradle heavy, chalky white slabs wrapped in linen and marked with wax seals. The air smells faintly of brine, sharp and dry, and strangely clean. Your task is simple, though not light. You are to carry 3 crates of salt blocks from the lower shelves to the carts waiting in the outer hallway. A shipment is leaving for a garrison to the north, and the supplies must be weighed, counted, and loaded before sundown. You nod, remove your overshirt, and begin. The crates are not impossibly heavy, but they are awkward, the weight uneven, the edges rough against your palms. Each time you lift one, a thin layer of salt dust rubs into your skin, and by the second trip your hands have begun to dry and crack in places. You do not stop. The work is steady, rhythmic, and in the silence of the salt room, you find that even the strain has a kind of music. The sound of your footsteps on packed earth, the thud of the crate on wood, the quiet scrape of linen against stone, these become your companions. As the day deepens, the light outside the narrow windows fades into something cool and blue, and a thin thread of wind finds its way beneath the door. You sit on the edge of the inner cart for a moment to catch your breath. Your back is damp with sweat despite the cold, and your mouth tastes faintly of salt. You reach for the small flask you carry and take a slow sip. The water, tasting warmer than you expect. It soothes the dryness just enough to continue. A short time later, the steward returns, this time with another worker beside him, a young man you've seen once or twice near the stables, his face always half hidden beneath his hood. He nods at you, says nothing, and lifts the next crate as if he's done it 100 times before. You work together in silence. not as strangers, but as people who understand the value of quiet labour. You pass each other in the narrow hall in sync without intention, your breaths forming twin clouds in the cold. There is comfort in this too. As the final crate is loaded, you both stand by the cart, shoulders lowered, hands raw and white-dusted. The steward inspects the load, nods his approval, and waves you off without ceremony. The other worker vanishes down the hall before you can say anything, and you are left alone in the stillness again. You linger a moment longer, your eyes catching on the fine layer of dust left behind on the floor where the crates once sat. You draw your thumb through it absently, not shaping anything, just tracing a path. Then you wipe your hand on your tunic and turn to go. Instead of returning directly to your quarters, you take a longer route through the cloister corridor. The air there is warmer, the light softer, and the stone arches catch the last glimmers of daylight like glass bowls catching candlelight. You sit on the edge of the fountain that marks the far end, your body heavy but not in pain. A few birds circle above the rooftop, their wings catching the golden pink hues of the setting sun. You watch them with a stillness that surprises you. The palace holds moments like this between its teeth, quiet, fleeting, easy to miss if you're not paying attention. Later, when you return to your cot, you find something folded on your blanket. A small cloth bundle, nothing elaborate, just a square of pale linen tied with a bit of string. You glance around, but no one seems to notice. You sit down slowly and untie it. Inside are two things: a pair of soft cloth gloves, clearly old but well cared for, and a thin sliver of honeycomb wrapped in wax paper. You stare at them for a moment, your heart suddenly loud in your ears. There is no note, no mark, but the meaning is clear. Someone saw your hands, your work. Someone left you a gesture. You eat the honey slowly, letting it melt on your tongue, the sweetness blooming behind your teeth. Then you slip the gloves on, one finger at a time, and close your hands into fists just to feel the softness. You lie down beneath your blanket, the gloves still on, the taste of honey still lingering. The room dims slowly, and outside the shutters, the wind picks up, rattling faintly like a loose hinge. But inside you feel warm, not from heat, but from something older, something finer than warmth. Recognition, care. As your eyes begin to close, you imagine the salt room again. The cold, the weight, the silence. And in the middle of it all, one quiet gesture left behind in linen. You let that thought carry you into sleep. You wake still wearing the gloves. At some point in the night, one had slipped halfway from your hand, and the loose fabric now dangles from your wrist like a leaf caught before falling. You slide it back on gently, your fingers aching in the way they sometimes do when sleep has held them too tightly. The room is quiet again, not the deep, resting quiet of night, but the slow, steady hush of people preparing themselves for another day of necessary motion. You move among them with ease, tying your belt, smoothing the lines of your tunic, folding the linen of your blanket just as you always do, but something inside you is different, something subtle, like a thread in the hem that's been stitched tighter. The gloves are too fine for daily use, too much like a secret, so you fold them carefully and tuck them deep into the lining of your bag, beneath the spare pair of socks and the smooth stone you once found near the outer gardens. You don't want to be asked about them. You want them to remain what they are, an unnamed kindness, left without demand, without obligation. A soft thing meant to stay soft. You're called to the southern vestibule that morning, summoned not by a steward, but by the palace mistress herself. That almost never happens. Her face is known to most, though her presence is usually felt only through echoes, orders passed down, expectations enforced, rules written not in ink but in posture. She is small and sharp-eyed, her voice low and quick, like something always in motion. When she addresses you, she does not ask your name, she simply gives instructions. You are to assist with the restoration of the tapestry wall, not the Great Hall banners, not the procession cloths, the inner wall hangings, the ones that shield draughty stone from visitors' eyes, the ones meant to catch warmth and soften echoes. They're older than most of the things in the palace, woven long ago in patterns now difficult to replicate. Some are frayed, others sag from their hooks like tired arms. Your task is to remove them carefully and transport them to the mending rooms without causing any new damage. The work will take several days, and your name is now on the list of those trusted to move things not meant to be touched. You approach the first panel slowly, your hands bare again, your breath held lightly in your chest. The fabric is thicker than you expect, coarser, the weave tighter and more complex. You do not recognize the pattern at first, rows of knot-like shapes circling a central star, but something in it stirs you, the way it holds shadow, the way the faded reds and browns seem to hum even in low light. You loosen the clasps gently, your fingers careful not to pull. As the top edge releases, a small cloud of dust spills into the air, and with it comes a scent that startles you, wool and woke, and something faintly floral, like lavender long past its bloom. You carry the first tapestry down the eastern corridor, its weight folded over your arms, soft against your chest. The path is quiet. Even the stone feels softer beneath your feet. When you reach the mending room, two women receive the cloth without comment, their eyes scanning the fabric with quick, practiced reverence. One of them offers you a nod. Not approval, not praise, but something simpler. Trust. On your third trip, as you return through the side corridor, you pause near the archway that leads into the private library. It is usually sealed at this hour, its iron gate locked, but today the door stands slightly open, a narrow sliver of golden light spilling through. You know better than to look in. You lower your head and begin to walk, but as you pass the edge of the open door, a voice speaks softly behind the wall. You move like someone who doesn't like being heard. The voice is low, female, not mocking, but not gentle either. You stop mid-step. Something in you tightens. You do not turn. Instead, you wait. "You've done work for the Lantern Keeper," she says. "I recognize the oil stain on your wrist." He rarely speaks, but he keeps close watch. You nod slowly, unsure if she can see you. "That's a good sign," she continues. "He only requests those who listen well." You still do not turn, but something about her tone, measured, dry, almost amused, makes you feel oddly seen. Not in the grand, exposed way of being watched, but in the quiet way of being understood. "You'll be sent to the upper storerooms next," she says. "You'll need gloves. The old linen burns if handled too quickly." Then the voice disappears. A few seconds later, the sound of a page turning carries through the crack in the door. You continue walking. Back in your quarters that evening, you reach into your bag and touch the folded gloves, your fingers brushing the soft fabric as if confirming their presence again. You do not put them on. You do not need to. You lie down beneath your blanket, the scent of dust and lavender still clinging to your sleeves, and stare at the ceiling until your eyes begin to close. Somewhere behind the tapestries, voices keep their own stories, and tonight you are one of them. You do not speak of the voice behind the tapestry. It settles into your thoughts like the scent of dried herbs left too long in a cupboard. Faint, unmistakable, but not intrusive. You carry it with you in the same way you carry the memory of early morning footsteps or the hush of lanterns being lit in quiet halls. It lives inside the small shift of your breath when someone walks too close, inside the glance you cast at corners just before turning them. You do not ask questions, you do not need to. Whatever game exists behind those panels is not yours to play. Still it lingers quietly like a line of a song you've only heard once but cannot forget. The next morning the gloves come with you. You slide them on before leaving the sleeping quarters, not as a reaction, but as a quiet acceptance. The fabric is soft against your skin, and even though the threads are slightly frayed at the fingertips, you feel the way they cushion your hands against the rawness of the work ahead. The palace moves slowly as you make your way through its veins, early light filtering through high windows and soft sheets that paint the stone in pale gold. The rhythm of the day is familiar now, the scent of warm bread curling from the lower kitchens, the scuff of sandaled feet along the corridors. the occasional creak of wood as shutters are opened by unseen hands. As predicted, you are summoned to the upper storerooms. You are not told how they knew you were ready, or who placed your name forward. These things are not spoken in the palace. They simply happen. You're given a linen sash to wear around your waist to mark your clearance, and a small ring of keys strung through a loop in the fabric. The weight of it is light, but it feels heavier than it should. It marks you now as one trusted to open doors that usually remain locked. And though no one stops to stare, you sense the subtle shift in the air as you pass others in the halls. Recognition without words. The stairs to the storerooms climb steeply toward the eastern wall. The stone underfoot changes slightly with every turn, from smooth slate to worn limestone to something older and coarser near the top. The space itself opens suddenly, without grandeur, into a long room with narrow windows and shelves that stretch from floor to ceiling. The air is thick with age, dust and dried beeswax and the faintest scent of mildew, softened by time. Each step inside stirs the silence like cloth caught in a breeze. Your task is simple in theory. Inventory. Lift each stored item carefully, record its presence, assess its condition, and rewrap it if needed. You are not alone. An older woman with sharp eyes and steady hands works beside you. She does not introduce herself, but offers a small nod and a gesture to begin. She does not speak unless she must. You admire her for that. Words are expensive here, and those who waste them rarely rise. The items are wrapped in thick linen, each bundle labelled in a delicate fading script. Some contain ceremonial cloths embroidered with thread that glints even beneath layers of time. Others hold scrolls or fragments of them, etched in inks that have bled slightly into the grain of the parchment. You do not read the words. That is not your place. But your hands feel them as you turn the pages, soft and brittle, like the edge of memory itself. You clean each object with care, your gloved hands brushing dust from grooves, folding linens along old creases, wrapping them again with fresh cord when the old is frayed. Hours pass unnoticed. The room swells and softens with the shifting light, the sun stretching its arms across the narrow beams above before beginning its descent. You pause only once near a bundle that feels heavier than it should. When you unwrap it, a small wooden box rests inside, carved with symbols you do not recognize. You hesitate, glancing at the older woman, who is now turned away, her hands deep in another crate. Something in the shape of the box stirs you, but you do not open it. You wrap it again slowly, even more carefully than before, and place it on the shelf as instructed. Some things are not for knowing. Near the end of the afternoon, as your hands grow tired and your back tightens from bending, the older woman turns to you. Her voice is lower than expected, almost kind. "You're careful," she says. "Care matters here." You nod, unsure if a reply is needed. She studies your face a moment longer, then returns to her work, and the silence drapes itself around you both once more. But something has changed, not in the work, but in the space between you. A thread has been offered, thin but real. Trust in the palace is rarely spoken. It is made through motion, through stillness, through restraint. It lives in the way someone hands you a bundle, in the way they glance at your gloves and say nothing. When the bell rings for the evening meal, you descend the stairs slowly, your steps heavy but your thoughts quiet. You feel the dust clinging to your clothes, the pressure of the keyring against your side. In your hand is a folded cloth, a small piece of damaged embroidery given to you by the older woman. "Practice," she had said, as if that were explanation enough. You do not know yet what to do with it, but you accept it all the same. That night, in your cot, you smooth the cloth across your lap, tracing the places where threads have pulled loose. The pattern is simple. Crosses within circles, repeated like prayer beads. You thread a needle with borrowed thread, your stitches clumsy at first, but quiet. With each pass, you feel something inside you steady, like a rhythm returning after long absence. Outside, the wind stirs softly against the shutters. Inside, the gloves rest beside you. The cloth stretches beneath your fingers, and the palace breathes around you like something alive. And you, at last, begin to breathe with it. The moonlight slips in like a secret, spilling over the edge of your blanket and pooling softly against the stone floor. You do not sleep deeply that night, but it is not restlessness that keeps you awake. It is something else, something gentler. You lie still with the scrap of cloth spread across your chest, the unfinished stitches catching the light just so. You trace them idly, following the uneven loops with the tip of your finger. Your eyes drift closed and open again, and the rhythm of your breath folds itself into the slow hush of the room. Outside, the wind sighs like something remembering, and within, the warmth of the gloves rests against your hip, quiet and known. Morning arrives without announcement. No bell, no call, just the gradual brightening of the narrow window and the shift of air that always seems to precede the stirring of footsteps. You rise slowly, shoulders stiff, but not in pain. There is a tenderness in your joints, as if your body has begun to understand that this life, however hidden, is yours to carry. You dress without rush, folding the cloth and slipping it into the pouch at your side. You leave the gloves behind today, tucked under the edge of the cot. Not forgotten, but resting. Some days require the rawness of skin. You're not summoned immediately, and so you make your way to the lower storage halls. No one stops you. No one questions why you are there. That is a kind of permission in itself. The corridor is cool, shadowed even in daylight, and smells of dried herbs and old wood. You settle near the back where bundles of discarded cloth are stacked, and pull one toward you. With careful fingers, you begin to untangle the knots, to fold the usable pieces, to separate the clean from the beyond saving. It is simple work, but it is yours in that moment, chosen freely. That small act makes it feel different, lighter. As you work, a quiet voice breaks the hush. You're early. You glance up. It is the young man from the salt room. He stands a few feet away, his arms folded, a faint smile playing at the edge of his mouth. He looks different in this light. Not softer exactly, but more real. His voice carries a lilt, as if laughter lives just beneath it. "Thought I'd find you here," he says. Words started moving. You blink, unsure whether to ask or simply wait. He seems to read your hesitation, and his smile shifts, becomes less teasing. "You're being noticed," he says. "Not in the wrong ways. Not yet. Just noticed." You nod slowly. You don't ask what that means. In the palace, notice is a complicated thing. It can raise you or it can unravel you. Often both. He crouches beside you, reaching for a scrap of linen and folding it neatly. They said you listened, that you don't ask foolish questions. You don't respond to that either. Instead, you fold another strip, smoothing its edge with your palm. He watches your hands for a moment, then speaks again, softer this time. "Careful where you leave your stitches, some threads pull more than you expect." And then he stands, straightens his tunic, and nods once before vanishing down the corridor, his footsteps light, almost rehearsed. You watch the place where he disappeared, not with suspicion, but with a strange calm. You've never been warned with such grace before. You return to your quarters near the end of day, your arms dusted with lint, the pouch at your side slightly heavier with cleaned fabric. A new piece, slightly larger. Faint traces of blue along the edge. You'll begin again tonight. The needle is ready, the rhythm is waiting, and the palace, for now, holds its breath around you. That evening, as the others settle into their low murmurs and the sounds of sleep begin curling through the stone hall like smoke, you remain seated on the edge of your cot. The cloth lies stretched across your knees, the blue thread still waiting to be drawn. You thread the needle slowly, your fingers no longer fumbling as they once did. Each pass of the thread through linen is a kind of sentence, one without words but with meaning. You stitch the old way now, quietly, patiently, letting the cloth tell you where to go. You do not rush. The palace has taught you the danger of haste. There are knots in every corner of its walls, in every command spoken too sharply. Better to go slowly. Better to feel your way. You do not finish the piece. You never do in one sitting. It is the beginning that matters. The moment the thread pulls tight for the first time, that small act of choice and attention. After a while, your hands grow heavy and your eyes dim at the edges, so you fold the cloth once, then again, and tuck it away. Sleep finds you easily now, not because your mind is quiet, but because you have stopped trying to quiet it. You let the thoughts come and go like wind through the upper galleries. They belong to the palace as much as you do. The next morning you are summoned earlier than usual. A boy no older than 12 appears at your cot just after dawn, his hair sticking in different directions, his sandals too large. He looks at you only once before whispering the name of the steward who has called for you. You nod, rise, and follow. No one else stirs. The hallway is yours alone for a moment, and your footsteps feel too loud against the stillness. You carry nothing with you, though you keep the gloves tucked inside your tunic, pressed close to your chest. The steward's quarters are tucked behind the eastern apse, past the smaller chapel that smells always of lemon oil and old incense. He does not meet you inside. Instead, one of his aides gestures silently to a side door, and you step into a narrow stairwell, the kind used only by those with instructions too delicate for wider company. The walls are close here, and the stone sweats faintly. You do not speak. The man ahead of you does not either. When you reach the top, a wooden door creaks open, and you step into a room you've never seen before. It is not very grand, not like the throne halls or the formal galleries, but it is strange in its silence. The walls are lined with shelves, and the shelves are lined with scrolls and bound volumes, some so old the edges have curled like autumn leaves. In the centre is a single desk, and beside it a small stack of documents, each wrapped in linen, tied with wax seals. You are not told why you are here, only that you must clean the shelves gently with oil and cloth, and that you must not move anything without marking it. You nod once, pull the gloves from your tunic, and begin. The work is slow, not because it is difficult, but because it feels sacred. These are not storeroom bundles or kitchen lists. These are texts with weight, with breath. You touch the edges as if they might bleed. The cloth slides across the wood in soft circles, lifting dust that smells of old resin and dried lavender. You do not read the titles. Most are in scripts you do not know, but you feel the difference in each one, the way the leather cover of one flexes under your hand while another is brittle, almost splintering at the spine. Each object is a body, holding something once living. At some point you find a folded piece of parchment tucked between two volumes. It is not sealed, and its placement seems accidental. You pause, glancing around, but no one watches. Still you do not open it. You lift it with 2 fingers and slide it onto the desk beside the others. Then you return to your cloth, your breath measured, your hands steady. Trust is built in such moments, quiet and small. No one may ever know you left that note unopened, but you will. And in the palace, your own knowing is often all you can carry. You remain in that room until the bell rings for the midday meal. The aide returns, glances at the shelves, and offers a soft grunt that might be approval. You leave without ceremony, the gloves folded back beneath your tunic, your fingers scented with oil and something older, knowledge perhaps, or the ghost of it. Outside the halls are louder now, filled with the echo of steps, the laughter of someone carrying loaves of bread too warm to touch. You do not join them. You eat your meal in the small garden tucked between the storerooms and the old grain hall. Your back against the sun-warmed stone, your eyes half closed. Later that evening, back in your quarters, you sit again with the cloth. You stitch slowly, your thoughts wandering. The voice behind the tapestry. The salt room. The corridors you now walk without needing instruction. You do not know what you are becoming, but you feel something shifting, something blooming without fanfare, like ink beneath dust. And as you lay down to sleep, your hands still warm from the fabric, your dreams slip quietly into the vaulted rooms you now carry inside. The morning after the archive room feels different in your body before it reaches your thoughts. You move slower, not out of fatigue, but with a sense that the air around you has grown heavier, richer somehow, like fabric soaked with the scent of time. The halls that once seemed distant and echoing now feel narrower, as though the walls have noticed your presence and begun to lean in, just slightly. You pass familiar corners and feel their silence curve toward you, not unfriendly but alert, noticing. Your task that day is simple, if less delicate than yesterday's. You are sent to assist with the repaving of the inner courtyard, where uneven stones have begun to loosen beneath the constant foot traffic of kitchen staff, messengers and visiting scribes. The ground here has its own memory, its own slow ache. You feel it under your knees as you crouch to lift each slab, the grit between the stones clinging to your gloves, working into the creases. The man leading the effort does not speak unless asked to. His beard is streaked with dust, his eyes soft despite the bluntness of his voice. He shows you how to measure the levelness by eye and balance, not by tools, and how to listen to the sound each stone makes when tapped back into place. It is the kind of knowledge passed down without names. You settle into the rhythm quickly, your hands recalling the steady pressure of the salt crates, the lantern oil, the coarseness of tapestry threads. The body remembers more than we give it credit for. Midway through the day, you glance up and catch sight of the boy who summoned you 2 days ago. He watches from a high archway, half hidden behind a hanging vine, his hands clasped tightly in front of him. When he meets your eyes, he does not smile, but he does not look away. Something about his gaze stays with you long after he vanishes again into shadow. As the sun reaches its peak, one of the stones slips as you set it, dragging your glove sharply against a metal bracket embedded beneath. You feel the tear instantly, not of skin, but of fabric. One of the fingertips split open, the edge darkened by a thin smudge of earth and oil. You say nothing, you do not stop. You finish setting the stone, press it firmly into place, and only then do you examine the damage. The tear is clean, straight across the middle finger. You press the edges together and slide the glove back on. It still fits, just more loosely. A reminder that even things gifted in silence are not immune to wear. By the time the work is done and the tools returned, your shoulders ache with the dull, heavy rhythm of effort well spent. You are not given praise, but the leader of the paving crew nods once and gestures toward the water basin without speaking. You drink slowly, your lips brushing the edge of the wooden cup like a prayer. The courtyard behind you hums with residual heat. The stones now rest smoothly again, the pattern nearly invisible except to those who touched each one. You return to your quarters just before the second bell of the evening. The others are quiet tonight, more so than usual. Someone is ill. A low fever, they whisper, caught from a draught near the southern stores. No one names the person aloud, and you do not ask. Illness in the palace is always spoken of like a ghost, acknowledged only in murmurs and movements. You wash your hands longer than usual, the water cooling your palms until they sting, and then you wrap the gloves in a piece of clean cloth and tuck them under your blanket. You will mend them later, not now. Now is for stillness. Just as you sit on your cot, a voice reaches you. It is not close, not loud, but it is clear. Careful, there are ears that do not sleep. You do not rise, you do not turn, you only close your eyes for a moment and let the words settle in your chest like falling ash. The speaker is gone before you can place them, the air already still again. But the whisper remains, woven into the breath of the room, as though it had always been part of it. You lie back slowly, one hand beneath your head, the other resting on your stomach. The cloth you repaired 2 nights ago lies near your elbow, the stitches now firm, smooth under your fingers. You trace the pattern with your thumb, and as sleep begins to take shape behind your eyes, you imagine the palace not as stone and glass, but as thread and linen, stitched together by hands like yours, some careful, some trembling, all invisible, and so you sleep. The next morning comes without bell or voice, as if the day itself hesitates to begin. You wake not to sound, but to a feeling, a stillness in the air that is almost reverent, as though the palace holds something in its throat. You rise slowly, your breath barely disturbing the hush, and find the light outside your window muted by thick cloud. Even the birds seem to hold back their morning songs. You dress quietly, tugging the mended gloves over your fingers, the fresh stitching tugging just lightly against your skin. The fabric feels different now, not just worn but shared, as if it remembers each place it has been with you. No assignment waits at your cot today. No call from a steward or knock from a boy with 2 large sandals. Instead, a folded note rests atop your blanket. Its paper thicker than usual, the ink unusually dark. It contains only 3 words: "Come after dusk." No name, no mark. But something in its curve feels familiar, and you do not question it. You slip it into your pouch and go about your day with hands that move more slowly, more precisely. Every task feels like preparation. When the sun finally begins to drop behind the western walls, you find yourself back near the old cloister, your footsteps echoing softly as you follow the directions your memory completes for you. Past the dry fountain, under the arch with the ivy-stained bricks, around the second garden where thyme and wild mint climb the stone edge like soft moss. You stop at the doorway just before the library hall, where the light flickers faintly through the high windows as if the air itself was stirring with breath. A woman meets you at the threshold. Not the steward, not the whisperer behind the tapestry, someone else. Her robes are plain but finely made, and she carries herself with a kind of quiet strength that makes you straighten without realizing. She does not ask your name, she only gestures for you to follow. You do silently, your hands folded loosely at your waist, your heart steady but aware. She leads you through a narrow hallway that turns sharply, descends 1 level, and then opens into a room you've never seen before. It is not grand, not gilded or adorned, but it is unlike any other space in the palace. The walls are bare stone, but so perfectly fitted that no draught slips between them. The ceiling is low, slightly arched, and a single oil lamp glows at the far end, its flame steady and soft. What strikes you most is the sound, or rather the lack of it. Your footsteps land without echo, your breath doesn't return to you. The room absorbs everything. She speaks only once, her voice low and even. This is the room that doesn't echo. Everything said here stays here. Then she hands you a small bundle, wrapped in pale cloth tied with a black thread. You do not open it. Not yet. You only hold it in both hands, letting its shape press into your palms. There are patterns within patterns, as she says, and some are not meant to be seen from above. You nod, not because you understand, but because you know you are supposed to. Tomorrow, you will return to your usual duties. You will not speak of this room. You will not change your path. But you will remember the thread. And then she steps past you, opens the door again, and the sound returns. Not all at once, but like light trickling under a shutter. You do not speak. You walk back through the quiet corridors, your feet remembering the way before your thoughts catch up. Back in your quarters, you unwrap the bundle slowly, carefully, as though it might be something alive. Inside is a square of cloth, not new, not clean, but embroidered with the same cross and circle pattern you have stitched, only older, finer with more patience in every line. Along the edge, a small loop of blue thread curls outward, left unfinished. You run your fingers along it once, then fold it gently and place it beneath your blanket. Tonight, you do not stitch. Tonight, you let the silence hold you. The morning comes quietly. There is no fanfare, no shift in routine to mark this day as different from the dozens before it. The same footsteps pass outside your chamber. The same morning light filters in, muted by the high, narrow window. You rise with the same slow breath, your body carrying the memory of work not yet begun. But something inside you is quieter today, as if a piece of the rhythm has settled into place, as if the beat you have been walking to all this time has found its rest. You tuck the embroidered cloth into your bag before leaving. You do not look at it again. You do not need to. Its pattern has already stitched itself into your thoughts. The weight of it is familiar now, like a word you have said so many times it becomes sound rather than meaning. You carry it not as a burden, but as a part of yourself. One more layer beneath the tunic and dust and gloves. The day passes in simplicity. You sweep a corridor, you restock a storeroom with clay jars, you help a younger worker carry a crate too large for his arms. You mend a torn hem with a needle you keep tucked in your belt, the thread pulling through the fabric like breath through lungs. No one notices anything different about you, and that is how it should be. This has never been a story for those who are seen. This has always been about the ones who keep the corners whole. In the afternoon the sun slants through the western arches and bathes the floor in soft gold. You pause to watch the dust drift in the light. For a moment you let yourself be still. Around you, the palace breathes, the walls holding the weight of its years without complaint. Somewhere far above, a bell chimes, not loudly, not calling, just existing. A sound for no one in particular. You return to your quarters early, not because you are tired, but because you are full. The cot welcomes you like an old rhythm, the blanket folding over your legs in the way it always has. You reach into your bag and draw out the cloth one last time. The thread is still there, curling at the edge. You touch it gently, then place it beneath your pillow. Outside, the wind moves through the eaves. A soft hush. The palace hums in its sleep. And you, for the first time in many days, allow yourself to drift without thinking. Not into dreams of grandeur, not into dreams of escape, but into the quiet knowing that some lives are sewn not into history, but into the seams that hold it together. You are one of them, and that is enough.